Welcome to the first community workshop for the Banning Clarence Street Transportation Study. We are so glad you stopped in with us. You are currently viewing a slideshow with instructions on how to participate in today's workshop. We have provided this buffer to the live presentation between 6 and 6:15 p.m. so that all attendees have time to log on and gather in this waiting room. These instructions will be on loop until 6:15. There will be a live presentation at 6:15, followed by a live question and answer session. We look forward to your feedback. Welcome to the first community workshop for the Banning Clarence Street Transportation Study. We are so glad you stopped in with us. You are currently viewing a slideshow with instructions on how to participate in today's workshop. We have provided this buffer to the live presentation between 6 and 6:15 p.m. so that all attendees have time to log on and gather in this waiting room. These instructions will be on loop until 6:15. There will be a live presentation at 6:15, followed by a live question and answer session. We look forward to your feedback. Welcome to the first community workshop for the Banning Clarence Street Transportation Study. We are so glad you stopped in with us. You are currently viewing a slideshow with instructions on how to participate in today's workshop. We have provided this buffer to the live presentation between 6 and 6:15 p.m. so that all attendees have time to log on and gather in this waiting room. These instructions will be on loop until 6:15. There will be a live presentation at 6:15, followed by a live question and answer session. We look forward to your feedback. Welcome to the first community workshop for the Banning Clarence Street Transportation Study. We are so glad you stopped in with us. You are currently viewing a slideshow with instructions on how to participate in today's workshop. We have provided this buffer to the live presentation between 6 and 6:15 p.m. so that all attendees have time to log on and gather in this waiting room. These instructions will be on loop until 6:15. There will be a live presentation at 6:15, followed by a live question and answer session. We look forward to your feedback. Welcome to the first community workshop for the Banning Clarence Street Transportation Study. We are so glad you stopped in with us. You are currently viewing a slideshow with instructions on how to participate in today's workshop. We have provided this buffer to the live presentation between 6 and 6:15 p.m. so that all attendees have time to log on and gather in this waiting room. These instructions will be on loop until 6:15. There will be a live presentation at 6:15, followed by a live question and answer session. We look forward to your feedback. Welcome to the first community workshop for the Banning Clarence Street Transportation Study. We are so glad you stopped in with us. You are currently viewing a slideshow with instructions on how to participate in today's workshop. We have provided this buffer to the live presentation between 6 and 6:15 p.m. so that all attendees have time to log on and gather in this waiting room. These instructions will be on loop until 6:15. There will be a live presentation at 6:15, followed by a live question and answer session. We look forward to your feedback. Welcome to the first community workshop for the Banning Clarence Street Transportation Study. We are so glad you stopped in with us. You are currently viewing a slideshow with instructions on how to participate in today's workshop. We have provided this buffer to the live presentation between 6 and 6:15 p.m. so that all attendees have time to log on and gather in this waiting room. These instructions will be on loop until 6:15. There will be a live presentation at 6:15, followed by a live question and answer session. We look forward to your feedback. Welcome to the first community workshop for the Banning Clarence Street Transportation Study. We are so glad you stopped in with us. You are currently viewing a slideshow with instructions on how to participate in today's workshop. We have provided this buffer to the live presentation between 6 and 6:15 p.m. so that all attendees have time to log on and gather in this waiting room. These instructions will be on loop until 6:15. There will be a live presentation at 6:15, followed by a live question and answer session. We look forward to your feedback. Welcome to the first community workshop for the Banning Clarence Street Transportation Study. We are so glad you stopped in with us. You are currently viewing a slideshow with instructions on how to participate in today's workshop. We have provided this buffer to the live presentation between 6 and 6:15 p.m. so that all attendees have time to log on and gather in this waiting room. These instructions will be on loop until 6:15. There will be a live presentation at 6:15, followed by a live question and answer session. We look forward to your feedback. Welcome to the first community workshop for the Banning Clarence Street Transportation Study. We are so glad you stopped in with us. You are currently viewing a slideshow with instructions on how to participate in today's workshop. We have provided this buffer to the live presentation between 6 and 6:15 p.m. so that all attendees have time to log on and gather in this waiting room. These instructions will be on loop until 6:15. There will be a live presentation at 6:15, followed by a live question and answer session. We look forward to your feedback.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Banning Clarence Street Transportation Study. We thank you for being here. I think Jim Galvin from the Dover-Kent MPO is going to start us off with a couple of opening comments. My name is Ted Folietta. I work for Century Engineering. We're the consulting firm hired by the MPO to conduct the study. So when Jim's prepared, he can jump right in.
Thanks, Ted. Good evening. I'm Jim Galvin, Principal Planner with the Dover-Kent County MPO. Thank you for joining us, the Dover-Kent County MPO, and Marilyn Smith, our Executive Director, along with Century Engineering and our partners, the City of Dover and DelDOT, for this first workshop on the Banning Street Clarence Street study. The MPO was asked to initiate this study by our friends at DelDOT. This workshop is our chance to understand what Century Engineering has found while looking for a connection from North Street and Eden Hill Medical Center to Forest Street. It's also a chance for any of you to ask questions or make comments about their ideas or about the idea of making a connection. This is our first workshop. Your responses will be considered by the consultant and will be noted if DelDOT or the City of Dover take these ideas and develop plans for the connection. So let's listen to Ted Folietta and hear what they found. I'm sure they've plenty of time left at the end to answer questions you either enter in the chat pod he'll describe, or in an email to me, james.galvin@doverkentmpo.org. Take it away, Ted.
Thanks, Jim. So just wanted to talk a little bit about the agenda for tonight's workshop. First off, we want this to be as interactive as possible. We really want to get your feedback. There will be a series of poll questions as we go through the workshop. You'll have a chance to vote on those, and then we'll share the results. Additionally, as Jim mentioned, there'll be an opportunity to ask for a question and answer session, which we'll have at the end of the workshop. However, please ask your questions anytime during the workshop. I'll go over in a minute on the next slide how you go about asking questions, but you don't have to wait till the end to type in your questions into the question and answer box. We're going to review the purpose of the study, the project history, alternatives that were previously developed, the revisions to those, most recent revisions to those alternatives, and then next steps. So how can you participate? You can listen using your computer speakers or by calling in on your phone. To call in and listen on your phone, please see the numbers here now. I'll run through them slowly, but they're on the screen. The phone number is 301-715-8592. The ID is 895-4745-8517. And the passcode is 765973. If you're calling by phone, only by phone, and you'd like to ask a question, please press *9. That will show our moderator that you have raised your hand to ask a question. Once your question is asked, once you're ready to ask your question, please hit *6 to unmute, and then again, after you've asked your question, we ask you to hit *6 again to mute yourself. So it's very simple to ask a question from a computer. If you're using your computer, if you hover at the bottom of your screen, a Q&A box should appear. Just simply click on that box, and there'll be a red square at the bottom, or a square at the bottom. Just go ahead and type your question in there and hit submit. Very simple. As Jim noted, you can also email him at james.galvin@doverkentmpo.com or .org, I'm sorry. So the study area basically encompasses an area bounded on the west by Salisbury Road, on the east by kind of the railroad tracks and kind of Lockerman Street. And the major connection we're trying to make is from the current terminus of Clarence Street in this area up through to a connection with Forest Street. The idea for this is to get some of the residential traffic that currently has to use North Street, Salisbury, and others out to get up to Forest to make a more direct connection, so they're not using those roads and not using some of the internal neighborhood roads to make that connection. So let's start with the poll question to kick things off. The first poll question is, do you live, work, or attend other services in the study area? So I'm going to launch this poll now and ask you to please vote. Okay, I'm about to close it. So if you haven't voted yet and you'd like to, please do so. Okay, I'm going to end the polling now and share the results. So most live in the area, others attend other services in the area. Thank you. So let's talk about the project purpose. I touched on this on the study area slide, but I'll go through it in a little more detail here. So as you can see, there are several purposes to this study. The first of which is to provide a direct connection between the Eden Hall residential development and Forest Street. So Eden Hall, if you look at the graphic on the right side of the slide, is down in this area, kind of south of Banning Street. The idea is to provide a connection, Eden Hill, I said Eden Hall, I apologize, Eden Hill, to provide a connection from the Eden Hill residential area south of Banning up to Forest Drive. Right now, in order for residents to do that, they've got to use a series of existing roads, and it's not really a direct connection to Forest. This connection, making this connection from Clarence to its current terminus of Clarence Street up to Forest, parallels Salisbury Road, so it precludes the need for people to use Salisbury. And it would connect a future extension of South Greenberry Lane and the proposed housing units on North Street. I'm sorry, on the proposed housing unit connected to Forest Street without using North Street or POW MIA Parkway. So again, purpose is getting this internal traffic to Forest Street without using the current streets in the study area right now. So let's launch another poll to see if you agree with this purpose and need of the study. So I'll ask you to vote on the purpose and need of the study. Okay, it's getting close. I think most of you who have voted are going to vote. If you've not and you'd like to, please do so. I'm about to close the poll. Okay, I'm going to end the polling now. And here are the results. So it looks like it's kind of mixed. Yes, no, and but I think the majority are just unsure. So maybe we have to do a better job of explaining exactly what the purpose is, and get some feedback maybe in Q&A as to what your concerns are with the purpose of this study. So I wanted to talk a little bit about the project history. This project has been around for a long time. The West Side Plan was completed in 2000. The purpose was to improve, at the time, it's very similar, improve efficiency in downtown transportation system by creating a north-south connector and improve access to existing transit, bicycle, and pedestrian network. So, this was reviewed back in 2000. The needs at the time were similar: provide a transportation system for continuity, alleviate traffic congestion, and at that time, two alternatives were analyzed, and environmental documentation was completed by Century in 2007. So it's got a long history, but since funding wasn't available to construct it, it kind of sat on the shelf, and it was just recently restarted. And that's where we're coming in, taking a fresh look at the alternatives, the project need, the land use, and some of the other key issues in the area to determine what, if anything, needs to be changed to move this project forward. So I'm going to ask that you take another poll, and this is what best describes the the group you most represent. I know there might be some overlap, but I'm going to ask you to just choose one that represents or that describes what you represent as far as a resident, a business, and so forth. So there's the poll, and I'm going to ask you to vote. Okay, I'm going to close the poll shortly, so if you'd like to vote and haven't, please do so. Okay, I'm going to end the poll. And it's kind of mixed. Looks like most are area residents and concerned citizens. So I thank you for your participation. And again, I want to encourage you all to use the Q&A function and ask any questions. You can, again, submit them now. They'll all be answered at the end of the presentation, but you don't have to wait till then to submit the questions. So, as I mentioned earlier, two alternatives were originally studied to make this connection. Alternative A, and then eventually I'll talk about alternative B. But both serve the same, basically the same function of connecting North Street with Forest to provide, as I said, to come off of existing Clarence Street and provide that connection with Forest, so that there's a direct connection and that area residents do not have to use some of the existing roads that I described earlier. As you can see, Slaughter Street and Clarence is about where, it's where Clarence Street currently terminates. The proposed extension would travel in this kind of undeveloped area, cross Lincoln Street. This connection to Lincoln Street would no longer exist, and then it would tie into Forest Street. This area would still be served off of Forest and Lincoln to here. There just wouldn't be a direct access off of the extended Clarence Street onto this portion of Lincoln. Couple of things to talk about with it. When we originally looked at this alternative, it would require the purchase of 2 residential parcels, but it does give a good distance between the railroad tracks and the new suggested terminus, as opposed to where Lincoln Street would come in. That's a pretty close connection. This is about 600 feet away from the railroad tracks. So that was the original alternative A. Revised or new alternative A basically does the same thing, makes that connection from Clarence Street and Slaughter Street's existing terminus up to Forest Street. Same thing, it takes away that connection to the east on Lincoln Street, but it's updated. It was updated based on existing land use, current land use. It was updated based on the following today's standards, particularly as they apply to bicycle and pedestrians. You can see the blue along the edges here would provide bicycle and sidewalk bicycle lanes. I'm sorry, the blue would be sidewalks, and then bicycle lanes would be inside of that. So unlike the original alternative, these alternatives consider the multimodal aspect and provide facilities for both bicyclists and pedestrians. But again, same basic concept coming up. So this would be Banning Street at the bottom of your screen where my cursor is. That would be where Eden Hill and some of the other developments are. And then even more recently, more recent developments, the Dover Station, which is a potential future development, would have a direct connection here, which would take you up to Forest Street, again, without the need to cut through Slaughter and over to Salisbury or some other way to get up through there. So again, an extension of Clarence Street to connect with Forest Street. So just to kind of bring it in a little more closely, so we're still on alternative A. This is the southern section. Just give you a little bit of a more of a magnified view of it. You could see Clarence Street with its current connection with West North Street, and it currently terminates here at Slaughter Street. This would extend through this undeveloped area northward, provide a connection to the Dover Station future development. And you could see the typical section that would exist here with 11-foot lanes, 5-foot bike lanes, 5-foot shoulder, and a grass median between the bike lane, or grass buffer, I should say, between the bike lane and the sidewalk of basically 0 to 5 feet. So there'd be some protection or some buffer between that. And then continuing north, that same typical section up, crossing Lincoln Street. There's the area of Lincoln Street that would be cut off, tying into Forest. However, this connection to Lincoln Street off of Forest would still be maintained to serve these areas here. So with all that, I'm going to launch a poll and ask, do you support the improvements associated with alternative A? I ask you to vote on that. Give it a few more seconds. If you haven't voted and you'd like to do so, please do so. I'll be closing the poll shortly. Okay, I'm going to end the polling now. And you can see the results. Looks like most of you are just unsure. So I hope that whatever uncertainty you have about this or any of the other information presented tonight, you'll ask in the Q&A session. So alternative B, very similar to alternative A, serves the same function, extends Clarence Street at its current terminus with Slaughter Street up to Forest Street. However, this connection is a little bit, would connect in with would connect in with Forest Street about 100 feet to the east of where the connection, where alternative A would connect with Forest Street. So alternative A was more in this area, alternative B here. So whereas alternative A was the new connection would be 600 feet from the railroad tracks, alternative B would be about 500 feet. So as I said, about 100 feet further to the east, this would be alternative B's connection with Forest Street. This entire section of Lincoln would come out under alternative B, and there'd have to be another access for these areas off of the extension. If your alternative A would require the purchase of 2 residential properties, alternative B would require the relocation of 2 commercial properties. So again, fairly similar, but just the connection is slightly different. So that was the original. Here is the new. And again, it's like alternative A, it's been updated based on the current land use. It's been updated based on today's current standards, and it's been updated to include bicycle and pedestrian facilities. The typical section would be very similar, it's not identical, and again, would serve basically the same purpose. So just a close-up look of alternative B, the southern section, as it comes off at the intersection of West North Street and Clarence Street, with its current terminus with Slaughter Street, and extending north through the undeveloped area, and eventually making a connection with Forest Street. And again, just about 100 feet or so further to the east than where alternative A would intersect with Forest Street. So I'll ask you to please take another poll, and that is, do you support the improvements associated with alternative B? So I'm going to launch the poll and ask you to please vote. Okay, if you haven't voted, I'll ask you to, and you'd like to, I'll ask you to do so. I'm about to close the poll. Okay, I'm going to end the polling now. And similar, I guess, similar results to alternative A, where I guess the majority are just unsure. So again, maybe we could hash that out during the Q&A session. So I'm going to ask for another poll now. And again, wanted to do a side-by-side analysis of the two alternatives. I know it's sometimes hard to think about where the one ties in and the other. So here is alternative A, and here is alternative B. And I'll give you a little bit of time to kind of study those. Remind you that alternative A is about 600, ties into Forest Street, about 600 feet, I'm sorry, about 100 feet further to the west than where alternative B would tie into Forest Street. Alternative A would require the relocation, the purchase of 2 residences, and alternative B would require the purchase of 2 commercial structures. So again, I'll give you a few more minutes to kind of look through those, and then I'm going to launch a poll and ask you if you have a preference between the two. Okay, I'm going to launch the poll now. And ask you to please vote. Okay. Going to close the poll shortly. So if you haven't voted and would like to, please do so. Okay, I'm going to end the poll now. And there are your results. Looks like preferences for alternative B with this, those that have voted. Some don't like either, and some are unsure. So Again, we can talk about any concerns you have during the Q&A session. So I wanted to talk about where we go from here. Obviously, we're at the public workshop now presenting this information. Based on the feedback we get tonight, we'll make some revisions to the alternatives and provide a draft recommendation report to the MPO for their review in May. That recommendations report, and what a Pell report is a planning and environmental linkage report. And what that does is it identifies any areas of concern, environmental permits that may be required, any kind of instances that may delay the project. It will identify potential funding sources. So there's a lot of important information that will go into that. There's not really the opportunity to phase much of any of this, but if we'll take a look to see if there's things that could be done in the short term, in the interim. But this project doesn't so much lend itself to that as some of our other projects that we've worked on. But we will look at if there's some interim stuff we can do to ease some of that traffic until funding is found for the ultimate, if this actually becomes, if this study actually becomes a project. Based on feedback we get from the recommendations report, we'll provide and I should say, and it's not listed here, but I will say that there will be a public comment period where the public will be permitted to review and comment on that. And those comments, as well as the comments received by the MPO, the city, DelDOT, and other agencies, will be taken into consideration. And all of that information will be documented in the final recommendations report. Once we have that final recommendations report together, we'll make our recommendations to the MPO. Once the MPO signs off on that, they will make their recommendations to the council. So that's kind of the process. That's kind of the next steps. And as you can see, it's a pretty aggressive schedule. We'd like to get all that wrapped up by the end of June of this year. So with that, I'd like to thank you for participating in today's workshop. As I said, all comments will be considered. All comments will be addressed, but there's comments that we have to consider safety and operational requirements, as well as comments we get from other governmental agencies. So all comments will be considered, but some may not be incorporated for, as I said, safety or operational or other impactful reasons. But they will be addressed and identified, or identified and addressed, I should say. Before we move to the Q&A session, when we come off this, when the workshop is complete, there is a survey at the end. I'll ask you to please complete that survey. It helps us have an idea of what was good about tonight's presentation, what tweaks we'll have to make for future presentations. So I'll ask you to please take that survey at the end of this presentation. Again, just to remind you, several ways to ask a question. If you're using your computer and you hover at the bottom, click the Q&A box and simply type in your question here. If you're calling in on your phone and don't have access to a computer, hit *9, which will alert our moderator that you have a question. When she comes on, hit *6 to unmute yourself and ask your question, and then please hit *6 to mute yourself after your question has been asked. Again, we will answer all questions. If we don't have the answer that you're looking for, we will get back to you. The other option, if you're not able to use any of these functions, or you think of a question after the workshop that you wanted to ask and didn't get a chance to, you could always email Jim Galvin at the MPO at james.galvin, that's Galvin, @ mpo.org. So with that, I will start the Q&A session. Sonia, do we have any questions?
We do. We have a hand raised and we have a couple questions in the chat. So I just want to start with one question that has already been answered, but I wanted to say it out loud in case someone couldn't see the chat if they were phone only. So we did get the question, what type of housing units will be built along Forest Street? They were referencing the 600 units that you mentioned. And so the 600 units are associated with the Eden Hill development, and they're located south of the medical center. So we were able to answer that directly in the chat. So let's turn to our raised hand caller, last four digits, 6940. I believe you are unmuted now. Or you should be able to unmute if you hit *6.
Hello. Hi, my name is Cheryl Short, and I live on Clarence Street, right at the entrance of North Street. So what happens to my property?
Again, these are conceptual alternatives, but I'll go back to assuming you're one of these properties right here that I'm pointing to. You're on the phone, so you can't see, but I'm sure it doesn't appear there'll be much of any impact to your property, depending on which property it is and how the actual project is designed. There may be the need for some right of way, but where you're at, that's existing already. So we're not looking to do anything different there. There's already some sidewalks in place. For the most part, they may need to be widened out, but again, that's something that we'll look at if and when this study goes to an actual design project.
There may be some widening that's associated with adding the new sidewalks in that area, but it would not be, for an entire lane or an additional capacity.
Right.
I did lower your hand, but if you have another question, feel free to follow up.
Yes, I have another question. The entrance of my home is on Clarence, not North Street, and there are no sidewalks. And if two cars park, one on one side of the street, one on the other side of the street, only one car can go down the road at a time. The street is not wide enough to handle any traffic.
Well, we're not increasing capacity at all. So we're not looking to increase traffic or increase what Clarence Street is able to handle. It's especially in where you're referring to. As I said, that's existing, and the current, as Sonia and I mentioned to the first part of your question, other than some sidewalks and some minor widening, we probably won't be doing anything to change that typical section through there. Looks like Josh Thomas from DelDOT would like to chime in on this.
Hey, good evening, everyone. Can you hear me okay? I just wanted to speak to the caller. My name is Josh Thomas. I'm with the Department of Transportation, and I just wanted to kind of reiterate the point and make it really well known that this is a planning study, and that there would be several steps that would have to happen before it became a capital project. So there would be plenty of opportunities to talk specifically about the design with DelDOT's engineers when that time came. So I certainly understand that you have concerns, and in no way try to try to kind of sweep those under the rug. It's mainly just wanted to let you know that when the study, so let's say the study concludes with some recommendations, then those recommendations would still have to go through a process, and that's a public process as well, working with our MPO partners to determine if this is going to be a project that the Department of Transportation can fund. If that were to happen, then that project would go through a design process, and then our engineers would work with the residents in the area to go over all of the details that you're talking about, and talk with you specifically about the concerns you have. And then there would also be further opportunities for public comment. So I just wanted to make sure that you knew that this wasn't the one and only time that we could talk about those issues, because it's really, since these are concepts, it's too early to talk about specific measurements and dimensions. So hopefully that helps.
Yeah, as it's, Josh makes very good points that we're, really far away from those details. As it's designed now, or not designed, but as it's kind of conceptually shown now, there'd have to be some accommodations for off-street parking if we were to come through there, because you're right, it's very tight. And if you've got cars parked on either side of the street, you wouldn't get more than one vehicle through there. But again, we're in the conceptual study phase of this right now.
Okay, we have a couple other questions. While it is clear of the benefits to the traffic from Eden Hill and the proposed Dover station, what benefits do the local residents have, for example, of Lincoln Park and the surrounding residential community?
Well, I would say the biggest benefit would be that vehicles that are currently using those residential roads as cut through to get to Forest Street, they wouldn't have to use those anymore. And conversely, the residents who live in those areas wouldn't have to wind through their own neighborhoods to get up there. They could use this connection. So there's that. I guess the second part I would add would be that there's the potential to increase development in the area. Some of the current land uses might be changed to something that's a little bit more in line with residential. I know there's some industry out there. There's some pretty heavy commercial. Some of that might be changed with this extension to more uses in line with residents.
Another question that we have received, how many people live in the affected project area? And the person understands that, further research may be necessary to answer this question.
Yeah, I'm sorry, I don't have that answer. I can certainly get it, but I don't have that answer. I don't know if anybody on the call has an idea, but I'm sorry, right now I don't.
So at the end, the attendees will be able to sign up for future updates. Is that correct? And this information could be sent to them? Yes,
that's correct. We can all of this information will be posted on the MPO website. It'll be posted on the city website, and we will, if requested, we'll send whatever information we can, either electronically or hard copy, to assist with any questions that the area residents would have, or businesses.
The next question is, how will this project be funded?
Well, again, it's, you know, I don't want to keep harping on it. You know, Josh said it, I said it's not a project yet. It's a study. The study is funded. That's why we're doing this. Part of the study, part of the recommendations will be to identify potential future funding sources. It could be state funded through DelDOT and a share of local funds from the city. It could be through grants. So there are a lot of ways it could be funded if and when it becomes an actual project. Right now, it's, you know, we call it, and I do it too, we call them project. We call this a project, you know, the Banning Street, Clarence Street project. It's really a study, and that's what we're doing. We're studying this to see if it has merit to become a project. If it becomes a project, then we'll identify those funding sources. But as I said, you know, some combination of state, city, and potentially grants would fund it if it did become a project.
If you are on this meeting with your computer, we do ask if it's possible to put your questions in the chat or the Q&A box. I do see a hand raised, but it appears that they are also logged on by computer, but we can bring you into the meeting if necessary. We did get a few more questions. So this question is actually for Josh Thomas, if you're still with us.
I'm here.
Is DelDOT in agreement with the drawings presented tonight?
So I think that depends on just how you define agreement. And I just want to reiterate that there is no final, just like we've been saying on this call so far, is that there is no final commitment or agreement to anything at this point. We've been saying that it's a study, and that's exactly how we view that. So I would say we at DelDOT are in agreement with the process. That's what we always say as planners, is that we are in agreement with the process. We're in this process with the MPO, with Century Engineering, right, with the City of Dover, to evaluate these options and get the feedback that we're getting from you tonight. So we're in agreement with the process. Like I said before, we're not. No one is saying yes, this is the final design, or that there won't be any tweaks or changes, or that it will become a project. So we are confident in the process and in agreement with that. And we're talking tonight about staying connected to the study. So I think it would be very beneficial that we have you all here tonight. If you get connected and on the mailing list for the study, we can have it so that each step of the way in the process, we can come back and talk to you and share with you, you know, the process as it advances. So, like I said, there's no agreement on anything yet until we get to the point where we're actually going to have a designed project, which may be several years in the making.
Thank you. Is the purchase of either the 2 residential or commercial properties included in the funding request for this project?
Well, again, if it became a project, yes, that would be included. But, you know, right now it's, you know, it's a study, so we're not considering that. But now we will provide, as part of our recommendations report, we will provide a conceptual cost estimate. So just a relative comparison of the 2 alternatives from a cost standpoint, and that will take kind of a general comparison of the 2 residences and what purchasing those would be versus the 2 commercial structures. So there will be a conceptual price there, but again, really won't have those details until this does become a project, if in fact it does.
Next question, has neighborhood flooding been considered? According to the First Street Foundation's flood factor tool, the Lincoln Street neighborhood is among the most vulnerable neighborhoods for flooding in Dover.
Yeah, so this is Lincoln Street here. And I guess some of these areas here are kind of prone to flooding. As you can see, we try to accommodate some of that stormwater with these ponds here. But again, I can't stress enough how conceptual this is. We don't know if these areas are available for stormwater management. We don't know if these are the right size, the right shape. Yes, we will consider it. We will evaluate it, and that will definitely be part of it. And you can see that we're kind of, even as in this study phase, kind of identifying some areas to address flooding in this area.
And Ted, the other thing is that there may be some off-site improvements that help with flooding in the area. The tar ditch is the long linear retention pond you have there. That actually goes down through to Water Street and floods out the intersection of Governors and Water. There have been talk of some improvements to that, especially through that intersection and further down through the hospital parking lot.
Yeah.
I don't know what the schedule of that is though.
Yeah, that's a good point, Jim. And as I said, conceptually, we looked at that, and that's why part of the reason these areas were identified. But if this were to become a project, we'd have to do a complete analysis to determine how that functions. If the ponds shown and how they're shown would be enough.
Could you go one step further and talk about the NEPA process as it relates to if this project did impact or increase flooding, how that would be an adverse effect to the historic resources in the area?
Yeah, so one of the things we try to do with the Pell report is to identify any NEPA requirements that would arise. NEPA is National Environmental Policy Act, and it states that if any federal funds are used for any portion of the study or project, and or any federally protected resources like wetlands, like historic homes, historic districts, anything like that, if any of those are affected, then we have to satisfy NEPA and do a full analysis and kind of identify what the potential impacts are. And if we can't eliminate those impacts, we have to show how we're going to mitigate or lessen those impacts and what we're going to do about it. So from a flooding standpoint, we'd have to identify which areas are prone to flooding, which homes might be prone to flooding, and what we're going to do to address that in NEPA. We'd have to get the required permits. We'd have to work with the appropriate agencies, and it wouldn't just be something where we're doing in a vacuum. We're doing on our own. We'd have to work with DENREC and the Army Corps of Engineers and the EPA and all of the regulatory agencies that would have say on any project that has federal funding and or has impacts to a federally protected resource.
Staying with the same theme, should we consider a broader study about tar ditch and its flooding impacts?
Yeah, we'd love to do it.
I'm sorry, guys. The MPO was requested to study Clarence and Banning. I think I think that's going to end up being one of the things that has to be done, is a complete study of the tar ditch as well.
Yeah, good point. You know, obviously there's probably a need to do a further study like that, but that is well beyond the scope of this current study. So.
How is this impacting Vine Street homes?
So Vine Street is in here, right here, this little stub. I don't think it's really impacting those homes at all. Again, you know, the potential for cut through traffic along what is this, Cherry, I think, Cherry Street, would, you know, wouldn't be as much. So that traffic that currently uses Cherry off of Vine would theoretically use this extension. Again, if these stormwater basins were to go in this area, well, then they'd be kind of behind those homes on Vine. But as far as the homes themselves and access to the homes, there's really not going to be any change.
Well, we do have one attendee that has their hand raised, so I have now asked them to unmute. Should be able to unmute and ask your question. It looks like you're unmuted.
I have a question.
Okay.
Hello?
Yeah, go ahead. We can hear you. Please ask.
Yes, my question is about the station. What kind of station is that? Is it bus, or are you moving the old train station to that side of the tracks? And
Are you
what would
talking
be
about-
the impact of the traffic in that area?
Jim, did you want to try to address that? And that's a future development. You talking about the
Yes,
Dover station?
but you've got it there, so that's a consideration for your roadway now.
Yes,
The-
you're right.
That project is actually being considered by the city of Dover, and it is, as I understand it, it's gone through the planning commission once. It's a developer who's interested in putting some development there. Not quite sure what the uses are. Are you guys going to be doing a synchro model of any of this, Ted?
No, I don't think we're scoped to do that. I think though the question is, the caller is asking if this is a train station, future train station.
Yes, or is it a bus station? What is it?
A bus
No,
station?
it's a residential or office facility.
Office.
Well, you called it a station, so that's why I'm asking, but
Yeah.
obviously you've got additional parking spaces there, so that creates more traffic.
Yeah, the name of the development is Dover Station, but it'll be a commercial development, not an actual train station or a bus station.
Okay, and that's in the area where the old ice house used to be?
Yes.
Do you know where the daycare is now?
Yes.
It's kind of parallel to that, adjacent to that.
Yeah, it's where the old ice house was.
Okay.
Now, the other thing about the flooding, you know, you do need to do a study because there's an underground stream that runs through that area.
Yeah, and again, anything within the
Hello?
study, anything within the study area will be evaluated. I guess the earlier question was kind of a broader, you know, broader focused flood study for this section, for the larger area in Dover, which would be beyond the scope. But anything within, you know, this basic study area, as you say, with the underground stream and the flooding associated with it, would be evaluated if and when this project, the study would move into a project.
Okay, and I have another question. My name is Sharita Matthews. I guess I didn't give you that.
I could say it.
Sharita Matthews. The question is, are there other plans under discussion for forestry?
Not as part of this study. So, that could be, that
I
might
mean,
be.
as a part of other studies.
The MPO had been talking with the city about doing some streetscape improvements of Forest Street, but there's been no funding allocated for that. I don't think there's been a design done either. So right now, there was an idea of actually making improvements that included a roundabout at the corner of Slaughter Street and Kirkwood Street and Lockerman that I think has been nixed, dropped, and I think that the remnants of that are those streetscape improvements that I was talking about to Forest Street. I think that's on hold right now.
Mm-hmm. When do these discussions take place? And the general citizenry participate or be in attendance?
So there's a process here that because we're an MPO, the first opportunities you have to have input in it is we develop a 4-year plan every year, and that plan talks about what improvements need to be made in all over Kent County, and there's a good share of them that are in the city of Dover, and that MTP, the Metropolitan Transportation Plan, is open for comments throughout the development process. We just finished that. Right beyond that, we take comments throughout the years in between, and if they're substantial and warrant some changes, we can amend that MTP. That's the first document in developing any kind of study or plan for our area, and probably the most effective for folks to comment on. So we had, like I said, we're kind of through the process now with developing it, but if you want to take a look at it, you can go, and you have access to the web computer. You can go to the website doverkentmpo.org and look for Innovation 2045, which is the name of the plan, and that has the listing of all the projects that were identified that in the county that we thought that we would have to look at in the coming 4 years, or actually 20 years. So there's something out there that you can rely on that identifies what the issues that the communities and the MPO is seeing, and anything that happens has got to come from there.
And the next question is for Josh.
Yeah, I see that one. I feel important. I was specifically requested.
That's twice. I like it.
Do you want me to read it, or did you want to read it, Sonia?
Oh, go ahead. Feel free.
So it says, Josh, just conceptually, is there any Del Dot opposition to the drawing? This is not a trick question. I really appreciate the wording there, because the wording is important for a planning study, because we want to make sure we don't commit to anything before we go through the process. So yeah, I can definitely appreciate that follow-up question. So no, at this point, I would say there's no opposition to anything specific. Currently, so from a higher level perspective, one of our overarching goals at DelDOT is to make our system more multimodal. So we discussed a little bit earlier about the one woman who was speaking was talking about how you couldn't even get 2 cars down the street when you have parking there. So that makes me think of, well, how are cyclists and how are pedestrians faring if there's no sidewalks, or if they're, you know, if the cars and bikes are all kind of competing for that space. So so conceptually, what you know, some of the benefits to us, or some of the benefits that we see, is obviously making it safer for cyclists and pedestrians to get around, and just making the system a little bit easier to navigate. And it, you know, it just makes a better city experience overall.
Thanks, Josh. So the next question we have is, will the proposed study go beyond North Street, such as Slaughter Street or Irma Street?
Proposed study, no. You can see where the you know, the current termini are. West North Street here, Forest Street here. That's kind of the north and south termini. So currently, no, there's no plans to go beyond that.
Is the city willing to request a study from the MPO on the tar ditch flooding? Not sure if there's someone on from the city.
So I guess you get an MPO answer. The MPO typically, no, the MPO does restrain itself to do transportation studies, looking at improvements to the road system that are necessary to, as Josh says, to make it work. We are, as expert as we are, we're not experts in hydraulics and making underground or channelized water bodies work. So it's a bit beyond our bailiwick.
We have no other questions. So if you are thinking about, oh, we just got one. Why is this area the target study?
Target sounds kind of like a bad connotation. I think, you know, this was identified as an area to improve traffic circulation, to improve pedestrian and bicycle use, to improve connections to transit facilities such as bus stops. So as I said, it came out of the West Side Dover plan back in 2000 as one of the areas to be reviewed. So I think this was, this was identified as making improvements, making the area better for the area residents, not as something to a negative for the residents. So I think the intentions are good with this study. Again, how it all ends up and how it may be tweaked, you know, if it becomes a project, you know, those details will be worked out. But the idea is to make it a better area for the area residents.
We do not have any further questions. So if you're considering submitting a question, feel free.
Well, again, I wanted to thank you all for joining us tonight. And again, oh, looks like we have another question just popped up.
No, they're just saying they're excited for the survey, the post-workshop survey.
Okay, all right. And again, if you think of any questions or have any more comments, please use the address I showed earlier at the MPO, james.galvin@doverkent.org. And I don't know, Jim or Marilyn, if you want to make any closing comments before we sign off.
Yeah, thanks, Ted. I think we had a great conversation this evening. And I hope to continue that conversation as we go into a future workshop and before we finish this up. So thank you very much, and thank everybody for attending tonight.
Thanks, Jim. Good night, everyone.
Good night, everyone. Thanks, Ted. Thanks, Jim.
Good night. Thanks, Ted.
night.
Really appreciate
Bye.
it. Thanks, Sonia.
Bye.
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 Bye-bye.